anyway, that was accurate 10 to minus 12, and Gitmo was all upset because we were setting our chronometers based on that rather than National Bureau of Standards, which was 10 to the minus 8.
Well, that's, I don't think I could keep track of that kind of time.
No. It was, I think, 1 second in 10,000 years was what it amounted to.
It is time to start.
All right, I guess it's the magic bewitching hour. And before we get into discussing the school budget, we have the set of minutes from the last meeting, which was on December 18th. It was a long time ago. And does everybody, does anybody have any proposed changes, corrections, additions, or subtractions? Do I hear a motion to accept them as submitted?
So,
I'll second it.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain?
Thank you.
All right. All right, the next item is on the school budget. I think there's some, I think Jeff came with his dog and pony show. We don't really need to repeat the dog and pony show that we had last time.
Nope.
And there were some questions that were brought up by a couple of people. And I don't have them all written down, unfortunately, and I don't think they're all on the minutes. But I know, Chris, you had a couple of questions you were concerned about the school budget.
we asked about headcount and student enrolled in each grade by a year.
Yep. So, I don't need to bring a dog and pony show at all if the board would prefer that they not present something. I think what I try to do is bring information to share with you so you can make informed decisions. What I have tonight is basically just a response to some of the questions that were asked, and I'm happy to go through those as they're responding to some of the questions that were raised.
All right, let's go through the questions that were asked, so that we.
So one of the questions was about how we build our budget and going off actuals. And so one of the things I just feel like we need to understand when we're comparing the process from municipal budget to the school budget is just where we are in relationship to the completion of the budget. So December 18th is when we had our meeting. At that point in time, the town budget was all but 5% complete, and yet the school, we still have about 41% of our budget period remaining. However, when we build the budget, what we do is this. We go back to our actuals in 17 and 18. We look at what we have spent. We then consider what we now know in our current fiscal year, 19-20. And then from that, we develop an idea of what it may cost in 2021. So for example, you'll notice on online services, 17-18, it was 13,730. 18-19, it was 12,445. And what we do is we say, okay, well, that's what the actual was, but we just go back to online services. We say, okay, well, what are we spending in 19-20, and what do we anticipate spending in 2021? And in this case, it went down simply because we have a list of things that constitute that cost. We have two contracts which are 2 or 3 year terms, and so we don't have them to expend. We don't need to expend money to renew those contracts in 2021. And as a result, our budget line in online services went down. That's how we develop such a line. There's also situations where it's not going down, it's going up. So, for example, in snow removal in the budget, we look back at 17-18, we had $4,000, we spent $4,000. This is the year that the snow crew, or the town crew removed the snow. The 4,000 was spent on snow removal of roofs. The state now, since the collapse of the roof in the Haverhill, I think it was, the state is very anxious on schools to clear buildup of snow on the roofs, and they contact the school to make sure that we clear the roof. So in 1819, this was the year that the town said, you guys gotta clear your own driveways and snow and stuff like that. It shows an actual that we spent $4,000. We had budgeted $4,000 because we didn't know we were clearing the snow that year. And this was the first year that we really had to figure out all the different mechanisms of snow. We billed quite a bit to our B&G for the salt, for example. And so in 1920, now that we have had a year where we understand the costs of snow removal, what they are, and we understand the state's requirements, we budgeted a portion, or one snow clearing, which runs $2,800 to $3,200 to clear the roof of all this snow. We've had to do that 1 or 2 times. We spent, last year, we spent $1,300 in salt. And so as a result, we put one snow clearing and a little bit of another snow clearing and $1,300, and that's where we came up with $5,300. It's increased, and it's increased because of specific things that we would have to anticipate. Market tide costs, and this is something I think Eric had asked before, we've talked about before. When we look at things that are tied to increases that we cannot anticipate nor control, things like electric, water, telephone, internet, pellets, the cost of gas and diesel, the propane, transportation. These all amount to $191,178. And what you can see is the fluctuations year to year of what those things can go up. And what you'll notice in the budget is that, we try to keep them as flat as possible. High school tuition can go up 1.5 to 2.5%. Health insurance this year went up 5%, dental went up 3.9%. Life insurance and short-term disability is kind of a lump sum. We don't know how much we're going to spend. Janet can answer more questions about that. Building insurance went up 9%, workman's comp went up 2.5%.
And what was the 9% because the market went up or because we had more buildings to insure?
No, just the cost of the policy, same facility. And so in just these 16 lines, we have $2,769,740.20 that is impacted by inflationary costs that we can't anticipate. This is just 16 lines of the budget. When you take a look at things like, we look at, okay, what's our supply cost, which has remained flat for the last couple of years. Paper is, I kind of looked at, okay, what are some significant benchmark things that we purchased? So supply cost, we have paper from 2000 to 2019 it went up 8.7%. You'll also know that we negotiate very prudently with the companies. This very same product, if you bought it, retail is $60. Hand sanitizer, which we spend a lot of money on, or I should say we not so much spend a lot of money on, but we consume a lot of, has gone up 9.2%. Garbage bags are up 8% from 18 to 19 actuals. So my point here is just that when we're looking to build a flat budget, and we have all these costs that are drivers that increase in cost, and we still have to buy them. What it doesn't mean is that we're not spending. It means we're not actually, we're doing less. It's not that we're staying the same, it's that we're doing less. Because with the same dollar, cannot buy the same product, the same cost year over year. Personnel and staffing. So this is getting to Chris' question. Regular ed, we have 15 teachers, 2 administrators in regular ed. We have a full-time PE, 2 part-time music teachers, 1 design lab teacher, 1 part-time art teacher, 1 language teacher, 1 library and director of technology, and we have 2 lower school reading and math academic supports. Then staff, we have 2.5 custodians, 1 cook, 1.5 people in the business office, 1 nurse, 1 counselor, and 1 secretary. This is our enrollment variation. So if you were to say, okay, well, what happens if our school was, smaller? Well, we still have to have a first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade. But we could, and we do anticipate that this person who's an enrollment, is hired as an enrollment based employee, would be able to be cut from the rolls. Special education, we have 5.5 teachers. We have a special education director. We have a K-4 special educator, a 5.8 special educator, an educator to deal with emotional disabilities, a 4-5 part-time, 4-5 special educator because the population, we have a higher population. We have a middle school math special educator simply because the math that is being taught in middle school is best taught by somebody trained in math, because we're talking about algebra and geometry. And then we have a part-time secretary. Aides, we currently have 11 of them. The number of aides is dependent upon the number of students who require them. You'll notice that we only have 1 regular ed aide. That's up top by kindergarten. The law requires that we have services for speech, behavior, or physical disabilities, as well as services for non-English speakers to learn English. The enrollment variables positions in special ed are the number of aides, number of special ed teachers, and the number of specialists. And so when you think about staffing enrollment, and you think about those that could be reduced if we were smaller in size, we could remove 1 classroom teacher for that split class, of which we have 3. And the number of special educators is 0.5, and that's based upon if our special ed numbers went down significantly, we could reduce by 0.5. If our number of paras, number of special ed tutors were the lowest level that they've ever been, we could reduce 1 to 4 paras. And then in terms of special ed specialists, that determines the number of hours contracted for OT, PT, and speech. So there are the individuals who are providing you the education as requested by our society, and this is our budget.
Can you whoop back a
Sure.
couple of slides to, nope.
Sorry.
That was good whooping.
Yeah, my keys, which one do you want to go to?
I wanna go to the one where you just detail out the 15 teachers, the 11.
Yep.
That one, 2 teachers. Okay, thank you.
Oh, sorry.
All right,
Good
what's the
question. So
delta from last year?
The question of para, a para is a non-teacher, it's a teacher assistant. So this is somebody who would work with a special ed student to assist them in their IEP, which is, yeah. The delta from last year, this year is 0, with exactly the same last year as this year.
And in your proposed year, it's a 0 change.
Yes. No change in staffing.
That's a question. Are the special ed kids also integrated into the regular classes?
Yes, they are.
So, okay, so it's not like a third of the kids are special ed?
No.
Okay.
How many placements do you have?
So our special ed is this year, I think, 17% of our total population.
Is that typical for a school your size?
For school, so the state average is 15. So we're about, what works out to be 2 students higher than the state average. But in terms of school, the difficulty of schools of our size, because of our population or total number, typically in schools our size, special ed numbers skew high, simply because there's a larger or smaller denominator.
How many outplacements do we have?
This year, we are about to graduate our last one. We anticipate that there may be one, but we have not budgeted for it. And this is, of course, a change from where we had been.
What, three?
Yeah, we had 3 at one time.
Thank you.
Yep.
Now, if that out of district comes through, then will you take the money out of the special ed fund?
Yes. We made that, that's what we proposed to the board as administration, that we felt that the reason we have trusts is to use them as insurance plans. And so, in the case of a special ed student, instead of putting money in and then, collecting the taxes on it and returning it the next year, we would just take that out of the trust, and then in subsequent years, we'd have to build that trust back up.
The aides for special education they're linked to particular students?
Yes.
And they're for the whole academic day, they're with that student, they go home with that student. They don't move to other students, they're
Yes.
working with a particular.
They do. So like, the way that IEPs are written is that it might be that a student has a language disability. And so if they're in the middle school, there might be an aide that works with them during language arts. And then when they're not working with that student, they're working with another student, it could be in mathematics. And so in many cases, there is there's a para that would serve multiple students within a classroom in the lower school. In the middle school, where there is classes change and things like that, what we do is we look at all the needs of all the students and see if we can't use one para to cover multiple students in their needs in the middle school. But that looks different than it does in the lower school, where they're all in a self-contained class. The paras are one place where, relative to schools our size and our cohort, we are very, very low in. Many schools have regular ed aides in every classroom, we do not. When we hire an aide, we hire them to work with a specific student, so if that student were to disenroll, then that position goes away. So this is an area where we're very, very frugal and very efficient in how we deploy our paras.
All right, I didn't write down all the questions. Did you have another one? Ready to go on to the next one?
So you have 10 special ed aides and then one up above?
Yeah, the one up above, we call a regular ed aide, because.
Is there just 10 little heads on the bottom?
Did I miscount?
Yes.
Okay. I will add another head.
You're counting the heads, oh my goodness.
Just trying to
Good
keep
for
an
you.
eye on them.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, I was trying to save us money on head icons, because it costs me. So in the case of our regular ed aide in kindergarten, if there was a student in kindergarten that needed a special ed aide, that person would serve that initially. But if he spent any time in the kindergarten, the routines of kindergartners, especially when there's 20 of them, it's kind of like herding cats. Having 2 adults there to help the students, whether it's tie their shoes, get dressed for recess, or any of the things that a 5 and 6-year-old needs. That's what the 2 teachers are there for, or teacher and the parent.
How, maybe I missed it, but the English as a second language and the speech, those 4 blue
identified,
Yep.
where do they fit in the numbers?
They don't, they're all contracted,
I see.
so they aren't they're paid by the hour of need. So some years we don't have any need for them, some years we do, some years that changes. But they're not employees, they're contracted for that very reason.
And you're
Oh, yeah,
budgeting the
down
same
there.
number of
Yeah.
contract dollars for them next year as you did this
I
year?
think actually are we down in contracted services?
It depends on which line.
Yeah, that's true, which, some of them, like, so for example, we have had ESL students, we don't now. And I can, you know, when we get into the budget, we can take a look at those specific lines to see, what they are. And basically, our special ed director, does the calculations for the number of hours based upon the IEP. And then we have a contract with the organization that provides that therapist, and we multiply that times the number of hours. If the hours were to increase, if we were to get a student that had those, then we would increase those, we'd have to take those out of either existing budget or the trust.
ESL is considered special ed?
Yes.
No, it's right.
Well, it's regular ed, but in terms of a specific, so it falls in the same thing as what's called the 504, which is a regular ed, so it's a ADA service. But ESL is still mandated in the same way that special ed is. That's why we kind of put it down there.
That should answer.
So just out of curiosity, the special education teachers,
Yep.
are they linked to particular individuals, or do we have them on staff as regular teachers that float amongst grades depending on?
Yeah, so, in our case, what we do is we divide them by, grade span. So all students K-4 that have an IEP receive their direct services from that, teacher. All students 5 to 8, will receive, services from that teacher. In the case of the part-time person, the grades that are, a portion of 4, and those students in grade 5 receive their services from that individual.
So the hiring of those teachers is dependent on the number of special education students in each of those grades?
To an extent that if we were to say, and before what I was saying in this one here, we've never been a school, and it's hard to imagine a school that wouldn't have any, wouldn't have a population sufficient to have at least one special educator in a grade span. What I can say is that the typical caseload for a special educator is 14 students, and our K-4 person has 23. Our 5 to 8 has 25, and our 4, 5 has 10.
Now, isn't that a function though of how severe the disability is, just how many students a single teacher can take care of?
So that's very true in the sense that it depends upon the students, but it's not necessarily a student, it's the number of hours of services that are required. So what we try to do is we try to do as much small group work, so that a teacher, if there's a number of students that require 5 hours of special education over a course of a week, that is in 5 individual hours for each student. We bring them together, and the teacher will work with 3 of them for each of those 1 hours. Some school districts approach it on an individual basis, and so if a student has 5 hours, it might be an individual teacher. There are situations in which the IEP requires that we do one-on-one as opposed to small group. That's all a factor of the IEP and the severity of the need.
Do we have any Contract for America teachers or any people like that?
No, we wouldn't qualify. You have to have a certain, level of, free or reduced lunch to be able to do that.
I have a question, and I'm not sure if you can answer it, I wanna make sure I ask it in the right way, but, so now you're describing these special educators and all except maybe the highest level have, they're overburdened, right? Or, at the very least, they have more children in their care than is typical. So do you think that these people are are they very good at their jobs, very efficient? Are the needs of these kids maybe less, like low enough so that they can actually meet that need? Or in another environment, if there was more money, would you more strongly advocate to say, hey, we could really, it would be much better if we had one more, it would be better for these kids?
Right, so that's a really good question. That's why we have that part-time person, because our ability to meet the requirements of IEP in terms of contact hours exceeded the capacity even of a highly efficient and highly effective teacher. We're fortunate that we have, and I would say this about all our teachers. We attract and retain exceptionally talented and committed teachers. And, you know, special educators are pretty amazing people because they want to take care of the kids. And so they will take on, you know, more than they could. I mean, most of our teachers, and definitely our special educators, they teach during lunch. They will sit down with their sandwich and be teaching with kids. Because that's what they love to do. And I'm pretty proud of them. They also are experienced, so they get amazing results. I mean, what we see when we have kids that come in from other districts that maybe in their school were kind of invisible, somewhat marginalized, maybe a little bit troubled. They come to the Lyme School and they change as individuals and as students. Their behavior diminishes. You know, at the beginning, it can be pretty disruptive, but as they spend time and they see the expectations, they see how our teachers, we all treat each other, we all treat the kids, and their attitude changes. It no longer is cool to be the disruptive one in class. That goes a long way in our ability to staff the way we do.
Also, if kids are, if instead of one-on-one, if you have one-on-two, for
Mhm.
instance, because I've noticed a lot of times kids learn from other kids.
Oh, absolutely.
So if they're just not one person and a teacher, a lot of times the kid can explain to the other kid.
Without a doubt. And it's one of the reasons why we like to do it in small groups, because the social interaction, the environment that's created when they're doing it along with peers, creates an atmosphere where the child is excited to do the work, excited with who they're doing the work with. There's some, interaction, both academically and socially. And, you know, in most cases that we do, but there are some cases where, based upon the necessity of the need, you can't do some services in small groups. But wherever we can, we prefer to.
Any more questions on staffing? That's where the money is. What, do you have something else for us?
Nope, what I thought is, I just have the pages of the budget to put up on the screen, so we can all share the same reference point. And, I'm open to your suggestions as how we can get to a budget that everyone feels good about.
Anybody from the budget committee now want to make a proposal? Since you've seen the total numbers before.
Do you wanna put a number on the table, is that what you're asking for?
Well, I think we could put a number on the table,
so-
that's all.
Oh, so this is.
the public hearing on the operating budget for the school.
Is that the,
You gotta check with somebody over there to make sure we put the right number on the
well,
table.
that's, which number is it?
Which number do you want for your operating budget to go to the public hearing? If we agree with what your
Is that the
proposal is.
total operations, that last page?
Yes, so it is
7200373312.
Is it page 11?
7200373112,
Yeah,
page 10.
I'll put that on.
I'll second it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I think, so, Janet, was asked if she could send a different, report format, which she did.
so I put the budget number on. No,
And I seconded it.
thank you, Judy.
Yeah.
All right. Any further discussion? This would be the vote to what we take to the public hearing. We're gonna play with the schedule a little bit later.
This is slightly less than last year, 7237145.
Yeah, we're down 1.64%.
This is before the teacher contract.
This is before, yeah, so, this is a CBA year, which means that in this budget, there is no increase to any staff. And then, that contract and any costs associated with that contract would be included in the second warrant. Our goal as a school board is to try to get this, even with that, warrant, to be a zero or slightly below.
But the staff part, that are not part of the bargaining group, are in this budget.
Correct,
for their
so all
increase.
administrators, all staff members, all hourly workers are included in the budget,
For any increase they may be getting.
and any increases that they may get.
Just to check your memory, so the 2019 was how many enrolled?
Students,
Yeah,
so, okay, so 2019 was 194.
how many high school?
So this year we have 87. Let me pull up. I
How
can-
does the enrollment compare between the 2 years, 19 and 20?
So, all right, so, and you weren't here for the last, so one of the things that we made point is that we can do a head count of 97 students. And we currently budgeted 94. In the last week, I've heard from a family that had a residence in Hanover, and they, and in Lyme. Next year, they will likely not have the house in Hanover, and their children will become our responsibility. Those are not, those are new this week. So if you were to consider those two as additions, we would be at 99.
199.
Sorry, 99
Oh,
high school.
high school.
High school, yeah, 90,
But
99 high school.
But they wouldn't change for high school between Hanover and here, right?
It would change his day.
Who's
Oh,
paying
but
for
we
it?
have, we have to pay.
So they would continue to go to Hanover, but now we would be paying for it.
The important thing here, though, is that you budgeted for a certain number of students as part of this operating budget.
Correct, 90.
You have a high school tuition and a special ed funds
Yes,
for unanticipatable, for better or worse,
yes, correct.
to pay the cost. For example, an out-of-district special ed student's $150,000, for
Yes.
example. Hanover High School students, what, 20,000 range?
20,252.
Can we get the kids to live in Hanover?
We tried.
Hey, if I'm with
Stay in the
20,000, I'm
We'll
with
give it an
10%,
extra
that's
10
pretty good for me.
As a board, we're still, we want to get closer to understanding the impact of the CBA and in the last, for the last few weeks and, you know, leading up to the time we do our final budget approval, we're gonna be looking at how much and where and when we're gonna be drawing from the trust, even if, not even counting the ones that we're not counting. So, you know, if we have to, you know, I think our goal is to actively use that high school trust to flatten increases in our budget.
As long as there's money there.
As long as there's money there. We ran one scenario in which we expended that money in 2 years to flatten budgets. And we believe that that would be a not a very strategic way to utilize what we have. But at the same time, we do not think that we want to maintain more of a balance or to let that balance stagnate without it becoming part of an active plan to reduce taxes.
All right, we got a motion on the floor.
Can I just ask one, just for my edification here, Jeff,
Yeah.
if you go to elementary special education, page 3. And this kind of gets to,
What page is that?
page 3.
Okay.
There you go, right there.
Yep.
So if we look at what we had budgeted in 2019 versus what actually happened in 2019, I've got different numbers on my sheet here.
Jim, do you know
About
what-
400.
No, not sure, are you?
Elementary
page
special
three?
education line,
It's
line
actually
1200.
page 4.
1-1.
Yeah, you gotta go over to the,
Go down to page 4 to the bottom.
where you got a total. Flip the page.
Which I didn't want to look at total, I want to look at the line items. If you
Oh, I'm
go-
sorry.
Go back one screen, Jeff.
Okay, page 2.
Is this regular or is this?
No,
Yeah,
page 3. You want
right here.
special ed?
What's
Yeah,
the one
line
number?
1200.
1200. Page 3, 1200. It's on page 4 of the.
Different
And which one of
numbers.
those lines?
This one here,
Is that from last week?
maybe. I don't
Oh,
know.
I didn't-
No, this came in today, this came in.
Oh.
What's the full line
This
number?
is
Yeah.
301, this is
301.
This is
33.
the one that they sent out today.
Oh, that is,
Where's one that says
And
301?
when
It's
you
not
get
the
to the
same as
total for
this.
the elementary
wait a
special
minute,
ed,
wait a minute. It's because this is what he wants, 1200.
the
Not the
total
guidance, your own
is
guidance.
He's looking at the-
897, 749,
He's
91.
looking at the other report, the budget's in 19 actuals.
Okay, we need the right section. He's in
It's-
guidance.
He's in guidance at the bottom, but he's
783
at elementary
versus
special
718,
ed.
is that what you're after?
Okay, but I think you have to go to
Is that right?
He wants to see something.
Okay, let's try to, just because, I mean, because we were asked to send out different reports, because people wanted to see different things.
This is all the same.
Let's agree with which report we're using. The numbers should be the same. Janet's here, she ran
The
both
teachers.
This
reports.
is exactly what she
Well, I want
said.
that section,
He
because
wants to
teachers
see
gets to
this.
that section.
Okay, so which line is, what's that line number?
Elementary special
Doesn't have a
ed.
number.
10-2-
5100,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
5110.
Yep, so we have 19 budget of
I have it.
14.
That's the end of it.
So back up a page.
You gotta back up a page.
Page 2.
He's looking at a subline.
Look at this, so this is different.
No,
Teacher
something's
salaries?
missing.
Go back
Something's
one more.
missing.
Salaries
Oh,
and
maybe-
healthcare?
You changed that, the page numbers maybe?
No, it's
and
elementary.
Which line are you
it's-
looking at?
It's right
Elizabeth,
there.
I'm
it's
just looking at
elementary
this Excel sheet.
education,
But you're
special
missing the
education.
top.
Yeah, I know,
I'm
I'm
missing
looking
the
at
top.
it. I was asking.
That's
Yeah,
different.
799.
Hold on,
It's
hold on.
not right.
So, this was done so that I could make it easier for you to look at. But what I'll do is we'll just go to this,
Try page 3.
page 3, all right. Page 3.
All right, the total's on the next page.
I think
No,
that's
no,
it
it's
right
right
No,
there.
he doesn't
If
want
he
the
doesn't
total.
want the
That's it right there. So I'm just kind of curious about, in terms of the, I think this kind of gets to what we're thinking in looking at actuals and basing a budget off of actuals. But if you looked at that, if you looked at what we had budgeted in 2019 versus what was actually realized. So these, I'm just curious, the second line here, you can't see the headers there, Jeff, but the 221,707 was budgeted for staff, elementary special education. Are
Right.
those aides?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and
174.
what we actually paid was 174.
Right.
So just, yeah, we just needed fewer aides than we thought we were gonna need?
So there's a couple things. One is, every day that we have a snow day, we don't have to pay an aide. If an aide were to take a day without pay, because they'd use all their sick days or their personal days, we don't have to pay. If in the beginning of the school year, the student that we thought was gonna be there wasn't, we don't hire somebody, and then when somebody moves in, then we hire somebody. So then we, there's a period of time in which we don't have their salary. What this number represents is, when we build the budget the year before, we say, all right, we know we have this many aides, we presume that they're gonna be there for the whole year, and we presume that we're obligated to pay them their full contract. If, for any of the reasons that I kind of just outlined took place, it's gonna reduce the amount that we actually expend.
So when you look at 2021 of 256 for aides,
Yep,
that number is based off, I would presume, off the current enrollment that you're looking at, right? And
the
you're
current
saying
number of paras.
that you have, well, that you have today, right? You're not saying, hey, let's look at 2020, you're saying, hey, we've got this many special education, either pairs today, and I don't see that, any reason for that to change next year.
Mhm.
So I'm gonna leave it the same with, salary adjustment, whatever else, but the number wouldn't have changed necessarily.
Correct.
But that's, okay. And the 342 is, did we hire another, maybe we hired another teacher, or maybe salaries went up slightly.
That's a 10%
from 2019.
increase over 2 years
Yeah.
there.
This one?
There might be another teacher,
Teacher
like
salaries.
special
Right there,
education.
right there.
This one here?
Yeah, 342.
And 301 is the beginning.
Yeah.
That's 2 years though, guys, so it's not, it's.
Yeah, it's 10% change over 2 years, 5% a year.
But maybe we added another teacher, maybe a
I don't think
senior
you can add
teacher.
another teacher for that amount
Because they were
without giving them
50/50.
raises.
Oh, that's right. So what happened in this case is where we had a teacher who was part-time para, is this right? So,
Yep.
part-time para, part-time teacher, and then they received the certification, which would then qualify for them to be a teacher in that area, full-time, and that caused the difference.
It's a salary adjustment for that.
Right, and so, while that person was receiving their certification, we did not pay them for that portion of the position at a teacher's salary. So we kinda got a bargain for a couple of years.
So the big change is in 2020, this year. So I mean, the 2020 budget is where,
Mhm.
The change has
Actually,
occurred.
The big
Yeah.
change
Yeah.
was made.
301 to 340.
and then it just moves forward, yeah.
So the other dumb question I have, I'm embarrassed to ask it, because I'm sure we covered it last week, or last
Yes.
time we met, but
No dumb questions.
this is dumb, but how are we not, did we cut the elementary school language program?
That's what I thought too when I saw
Yeah.
that.
It's a good
Oh, oh,
it's a good
shifted,
question.
shifted.
He did mention it last week
Not gonna
briefly.
say
but-
We shifted it.
And that was my question to follow, where did it move to?
It moved into regular instruction
Regular.
salaries.
It doesn't seem like the teacher salaries for 2021 have increased enough to compensate, I don't see 90,000 more dollars up there.
Right, so there was other movement, there was movement in library. So I think if you look at the library movement, that might
I gotcha,
make more sense.
just curious.
Tech, library, yeah.
So a lot of what we try to do, and this is one of the ways that we're trying to look at controlling FTEs or positions, is what we try to do is we try to create places where there's kind of a symbiotic relationship in the roles that these individuals are fulfilling. So instead of hiring a part-time person to do one aspect and a part-time person to do another aspect, and then that person gradually creeping up full-time, we say, hey, look, we can marry these two positions together, create a full-time position in which we have better candidates, and there isn't necessarily that positional creep that happens as that person gets engaged in their program and wants to do more.
Except when you combine 2 part-time positions into a full-time position, you then add the benefits cost.
In some cases, that's true.
In some cases, if they work more than 35 hours, you don't have any choice,
They
it's
might
federal
have
law.
benefits through a spouse somewhere else, and they would take them. Because you guys do a buyback, right?
Yes.
So speech services are something that are, you're saying we're contracted, right? Those are things that
Correct.
we can only take a shot at what we think they might be, and then what we actually realize, like the 96 57,000 to 56,000.
So that is actually because, this is where we do the title.
Okay, yeah, so you're talking about the 96,885 and then the,
50.
so the 56,045, there's, the reason for that is that a portion of that person's salary is put into IDEAB funds.
Which is a grant, a federal grant.
So when the budget is built and the calculation is done for taxes, there is a piece of the calculation that shows IDEA funds coming into the school district. When we're looking at the expenditure side, we only show the expense in this group until the grant is actually approved. That doesn't happen until the summer.
Has it ever not been approved?
Not that, no, because we know we're getting the funds, it's how we can expend them that's questionable. So if we actually spent the money on something other than speech and used 100% tax dollars to support speech, we would lose our funding and never be able to spend it on speech again. It's called supplanting. It's a very strange calculation.
But this particular grant is with respect to speech only?
No.
No, there's various different things that we spend it on. There's speech, we spend some for reading tutor and other things we do spend, use it for, behavioral coaching, et cetera. But it's not a lot of money. This is has the greatest financial impact is in speech.
So, but that's what that difference is?
Yes.
Yes, because it's coded elsewhere. So when you're looking at the budget and you're looking at your actuals and you go down farther in the budget and you get down to where the grants are, you can see the speech money being spent in the grant section.
So we don't give ourselves, but on the budgeting process,
there's
you
the
don't give yourself the
40,000 right
benefit of that 40,000 coming in.
You do, on the revenue
Right.
side,
Well, I'm just looking at the back of our budget here, didn't we have zeros for all
yeah,
that?
because the grant hasn't been approved, I can't say that it's
Le-
attributed to
But we
that.
could reasonably assume that there's 40,000 coming in that, because every year in the past it has come in, right?
Right, and we're sort of, we do know that ahead of time, how much we're gonna get. It's a guesstimate, but it's usually about the same amount of money each year. And the way it's attributed in the budget process is on the revenue side, not on the
No,
expenditure
I
side.
understand, I'm just thinking from a
Yeah.
pure budget,
Right.
cash flow basis, what are we gonna need? We're gonna need, 56,000, not 95,000.
Right, but,
But we're not raising all of the 95, because on the revenue side,
Because you're raising underneath, because
Right.
you're going to the town with
I'm
the,
taking that out
no,
on the
but what point are
revenue.
you gonna, at what point would we put the revenue number in though?
When I'm actually doing the tax calculation
Oh,
in
so we'll do it before
September.
town meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
not before town meeting, before
before
taxes
tax. In September.
in September.
So we are approving a budget that's fluffed by the grant money.
It's
Now,
not
fluff's not the right
fluff.
word to use, but it's overstated by what we think it truly will be because of the grant money.
No, because the grant
Because it
is on
comes
the
out of
rep,
the bottom.
All right, here's the issue that I think you're missing. We, in this budget, are authorizing how much money they can spend. It has nothing to do with what their revenues are. And some of these expenditures are gonna be subject to revenues that are specifically designated for cause. Like in this case, there's a grant that's specifically available for the speech. But the problem is, we have to authorize the total amount for speech as part of the budget, because we're different from your personal when we're dealing with government, because we're setting and voting on how much you can spend. And we never vote on how much we're gonna receive in revenues. But the revenues come in when we then go and calculate the taxes.
If you put only 50 in there, they can only spend 50. If you put 90 in there, they can spend 90,
They can
which,
only spend, I got you. What they can
That's-
spend, not-
That's the issue.
that's,
So, this is just for my own edification here though, so when I look up, a couple lines above that, and, we spent, $43,000 more in computer equipment than we budgeted. Did that 43,000 come in effectively because we had, as an example, maybe 40,000 coming in as a grant against the speech, and that money then became, it's fungible, we could use it for the computers? Is that how that would work, or not?
so in this
No.
particular case, it wasn't correlated to that. In this particular case, it was, because we had, we had some grants, we had some tuition money that we received for students that are tuitioning into Lyme School. And what we did is we pre-bought technology so that, because the amount that we have, the amount that we have in the budget does not reflect the, well, it reflects now the long-term cost, the maintenance cost. But in order to get to that point, we had to pre-buy some
So
technology.
we knew that money was coming in to fund that, it just, I'm looking at the expense line without
Yeah.
looking at the offset money that came in from
Right,
grants.
we
or
knew
whatever.
at the end of, at the end of last year that we'd have a surplus. So we pre-bought technology. And then, we returned that, that amount, the remaining amount to taxes. And so this year, we're not gonna be expending all of our current year's technology budget, and we'll be returning that to reduce taxes.
I'll shut up here to the last question. So, in terms of the budget, is it okay to shift monies around line items as long as it stays within?
Yeah, you
Yeah,
approve,
so you can-
you approve the bottom line, you approve
Okay,
the final dollar
We
number.
don't, it's not a line item budget.
I'm not saying the budget committee, I'm just saying, you know.
Town meeting and the budget committee only do the total.
Okay.
And the school can move stuff from lines indiscriminately almost, just like the selectmen. Of course, they're accountable for it.
Right. Not, so for example, you know, every time that, it's one of the reasons why when we, for example, with that snow removal, we bought, the salt out of the B&G budget. And we thought, well, this is B&G, and then as we thought about it this year, we were like, yeah, you know what? It makes more sense for us to say, okay, what is the cost of snow removal now that we're paying for it, so we can track it? And so now what we've said is, okay, that's gonna come out of the snow removal line as opposed to the B&G line. So some of the changes that you see is because as Janet and I normalize where expenses are, and we wanna be able to track the actual costs of things, we attribute them to their actual functional line, even if that functional line is at a lower amount. We're keeping our eye on what because we can't, as state law, we cannot overspend what you approve. The only way that we can overspend by $1 what you've approved is by going to the, and I don't know if it's the Superior or Supreme Court, one of the big courts.
Superior Court.
Filing for approval of a special town meeting and
Yes.
having the town hold that meeting and approve whatever dollar amount over that the town has approved to expend.
I think
And
there's another thing that Superior Court can do for emergent situations, if you have in the town's surplus account enough to pay for it without raising it from taxes.
I think you have to go to court to get it.
Yeah, but you can without
Maybe you
a
can
special
overspend
town
a
meeting.
special ed.
yeah, the only thing we can overexpend is on the special ed line. And that's because the state said, hey, look, this is non-controllable, you could go over your budget with one student very easily. If that were to happen, there's still a state rigmarole that we have to do.
Yes.
And we basically what it means is that we can push it to the next fiscal year and then collect that money through an overage in the following year, or do we still have to resolve it by August, do you know? We've never had to do it, so it's something we work hard to avoid.
The judge tells you what you're gonna do.
Probably right. We'll listen to the judge.
And it may not be predictable.
But the point being is that we cannot overspend the budget, the bottom line budget.
But
The
you
only
can
thing-
move stuff from one line item to another within that
Correct.
total.
Yep.
All right, we have a motion on the floor for the 7200373, and it would be, we got .32, to go to the public hearing. Any further questions, comments, or discussion? Those in favor?
I guess one comment would just be, since the salary increases aren't reflected in here, which I think is the CBA, how, like, if we approve this number, are you gonna have to, like, are you gonna have
No,
to
it's
take
a,
a bunch of money
it
away?
stands all on its own.
They do a warrant
It's a
article.
Oh, I see,
Warrant
that's a
article.
warrant article, gotcha.
But also
Okay.
to your point, right now, I don't believe you are doing a formal, we can still come back, on the
Public.
20.
Well, the public hearing, we're gonna discuss that
Yeah.
toward the end of the
So
meeting.
if there are changes, so it's not atypical between now and the next time that we meet, whenever that is, for us to get more information. So for example, last night, we spent a long time meeting with the Hanover, or excuse me, the Dresden district, talking to them about the high school tuition. Today, we were on the phone with our other high schools. We have not got the formal tuition amounts yet. Right now, we have a presumptual 2.5%. Now, I know in one case, it sounds to me like they're suggesting that it might be 4. In others, it might be less than 2.5. But we'll know that information. And what we're gonna come back to you with is a budget with more of that information, more precisely, based upon the actuals as we get them. We'll learn from the Vermont schools by February 15th. That's when they have to post the state what their,
January.
January 15th.
That's good.
Yeah, January 15th.
Yeah, and even if we don't make, Jeff, I think it's important, even, this is the number we go to the public hearing. We have a public hearing, we can change it at the public hearing.
But
We
only
can
within
change it
this-
from the floor of the district meeting, but it does not include any increase in salaries for members of the collective bargaining agreement. That is a separate warrant article that will be voted on, totally separate of this budget number.
Right. And then out of curiosity, when you say you can change the number at town meeting, isn't it capped within?
10% of the total.
We can increase up to 10%, but I think we
Right.
can reduce it.
No, it's, I
You
think
can
it's just a
reduce it.
10% change.
You can, no, you can reduce it.
Infinitely?
Yeah, it doesn't matter, it's just it
It's already
increase.
zero?
Well, no, let's hope not.
Double check that, but,
You
And,
can't-
We have
you know, I
that
think that,
question
and
too,
I think the important thing here is to recognize that, we're building a budget, that's based upon county heads and knowing the population that currently exists. We have, January, February, March, we have 3 months before, we have a vote. A lot happens in 3 months, a lot has happened in 2 weeks. Then that budget that's passed is again projecting, isn't even gonna start for April, May, June, July, July, another 3 months beyond that. So, you know, we try to provide you with the most precise information based upon the information that we have. You know, what I hope you see here, or what I hope you can appreciate is the fact that we build this budget from zero. We build this budget saying, all right, what are the contracts for software? What's the sum total of that? That's what we put in the budget. And in many cases, we're doing that without even accounting or knowing for the inflationary cost of those products. You notice that supplies has remained relatively flat.
Are we ready to vote?
What are we, but we can presume that things are increasing.
I mean, this is not the final budget that would come out of the school district meeting, because they always change between now and then.
Okay.
Either at the request of the school, at the request of the public at the meetings, at the request of the public at the public hearing. And this is just to move on to the next step.
Let's do it.
Do we hear a vote? All those in favor of the number that previously stated several times, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Abstain? You opposed?
Opposed.
So what is it, 810?
And will you give us some suggestions as to what you see
I didn't vote, right?
as concerns?
There are 9 members, so it'll be 8-1-0, everybody's here. Because the chairman doesn't vote unless it's a tie.
Right. 11.
So it's 9-1-0. All right. Hopefully we're through with the school for tonight.
Can I just ask, just for clarity's sake, so one of the things that, from last week, that I felt a little confused about is moving forward. Does the budget committee wish us to compare budget to budget, actual to budget? What is the will, so that when I come in, I am sharing with you comparisons based upon what you desire, and it's not seen as I'm trying to wrap things in a different wrapper. What is the will of this committee?
Personally, I like the format that was set out recently, I thought that was good.
The newer one that came out today?
The newer one, I like that one.
Okay. When we talk about increase, are we saying, so the format of the report, we can do that. But when we talk about increases in the overall budget, historically, it's always been budget to budget. Is that continue to be the will of this group?
Yeah.
I'd say no, it's
No.
totally, I mean, you have to look at both if you're doing it. You could have a significant change like we did this year with last 2 years of enrollment. It doesn't make sense to compare budget based off of 220 students with a budget that's based off of 200 students. So
So
you have to look, you have,
which actual do you want
the
to?
thing that I find most useful is whoever sent the Excel sheet out.
Mhm.
I can paste and, cut and paste columns how I like to see it. But if you put it in Excel format, it's perfect. But I think that, all of us should be thinking of it in both ways. You're comparing budget to budget and budget to actual.
Mhm.
And then last year's budget to actual too. I mean, all those things are relevant.
When you described how you built the budget, where you looked at
Yep.
the 2 completed years actual,
Yep.
and let's say you weighted those at X percentage level, and then what you're spending in the non-complete one is actual,
Mhm.
and what you have in the non-complete one is budget.
Mhm.
And you're putting all of those things in the pot and shaking them up with certain weighting factors. And then you're throwing in changes in enrollment, how that affects your staffing particularly,
Mhm.
and your high school tuition, and your special ed costs. You really can't say it's actual to actual or budget to budget, it's a combination.
I think that's
And
true.
and I think that's an important thing to remember. It isn't a simplistic comparison of one column of numbers to a second column of numbers, all the way across in all characteristics, because
The situation is different each year.
the number of high school tuition students determines that. And it has nothing to do with what the budget was, actual or budget last time. It's the number of students that you're gonna have that determines how much money is in that pot, and that's a big pot.
Yeah. So the reason I ask is because in the past, one of the things that the board has provided us is a goal, a target. Please, bring us a budget that is X. And so unless we know what that is a percentage of, it's hard to say that we have met that goal or not, because
Well, the
we're-
target is what you have to raise by taxes in reality.
Mhm.
It's gonna say it comes down to one simple number.
Yeah, how much you have to raise by taxes, that's what the people in this town care about, is their taxes.
The difficulty with that is how much we raise from taxes is not based upon only how much we spend, it's also revenues, which
That's
we
correct.
don't approve.
But that's the bottom line of what people are interested in.
I couldn't agree with you more, but that's not, unfortunately, New Hampshire is set up in such a way that that's not the number we're approving. We don't even know right now, how much we're gonna have to raise out of taxes,
All of the
because,
government finance.
well, so my point being is, these things are important if we're gonna be working collaboratively to a goal. that we understand, you know, what our target is. I think instinctually what, you know, and maybe we wanna do this differently. But we can say, all right, so here's the budget for the cost of education that we have, based upon the number of students we have, based upon what we're trying to do. And that number is gonna vary, and that's gonna vary based upon all the things that you said. But what that doesn't mean, what that means is that it's very hard for us to know, how we continue to improve as a school, meet the needs of kids for a changing economy, and a changing future. We want to work collaboratively with you. We need you guys to help solve the challenge of, the societal challenge that you're charging us with, which is, Lyme School, please educate our children. That's as much your challenge as it is mine. What you're saying, ultimately what this committee is saying is, Jeff, here's the resources you have to do it. And I will do that to my best ability. But I need your guidance to know what targets we're trying to do. I need to understand what the challenges in other aspects of town are, so that we are balancing those priorities. But it has never, nor will it ever be, a desire to build in fluff, or to build fiefdoms, or to expend money that we don't need to.
I think the way that you build the budget is the way that, it's the only way I can see to do it. I mean, you guys are building it, you're starting with the number of students, and you're splitting classes, and you're figuring that out. I think that's exactly how you should do it. The trick that I have is when you have a change in, just as an example, if enrollment went down 10 students, that, you know, all of a sudden, the budget is no longer really the relevant number we're comparing to.
Right.
But you're not basing it off of that. You're basing your number off of, okay, I got 10 fewer students than I had. What does that mean in terms of my teachers and how am I gonna allocate the classes? So you're already doing kind of what I think that you're hearing some people of the budget committee saying we want.
I agree.
It's just a question of how do you discuss it? Not you personally, but
No,
how
absolutely.
do you look at the comparisons? And I think my only point is, you know, if you have a dramatic change in things like that, it isn't relevant to look at the budget that was last year predicated on 10 more students. It's look at what do we actually have to educate those kids.
Because it's to explain it and understand it, because you can't even say dollar per student, because if you have 3 less students in the fifth grade, you
can't
still pay
split
the
the class.
teacher the same amount.
I think
Yeah.
to the degree that it's possible, maybe having that piece of metadata associated, like in 2017, we had X number of elementary K-grade kids, we
Well,
had
that's
X number
why
of
I
high
asked
school
so many
kids.
people that.
And
Right.
while you don't know next year, you might have you have probably some
Well,
reasonably
they
good
did present that
understanding,
with the
right?
budget initially.
Yeah.
They did present that with the budget
Yeah, I mean, I think
initially, the
that-
number of high
that-
school students, et cetera.
That
But what-
number would be I mean, it would be helpful to track it, you can find it, eventually it gets published by the state, but I don't know what
It's in the
this
town
what this
report.
fiscal
Right,
year was.
but so here's the thing, next year, when we go through this process, I think what I'd like to do is meet with you all before we even present a budget, and have you tell me, what are the things you want me to bring you? What's the data that you want? And that could be, you know, class enrollments, it could be,
FTEs.
yeah, FTEs, it could be high school enrollment, our estimations of tuition. I'll bring you all that information. And then what is very helpful for us in the process is, and has historically been the role of the budget committee, is for the budget committee to say, all right, look, the town is faced with this, which means it's gonna be this much increase, we'd like you to stay somewhere around this. I don't think we can year over year expect that our taxes are not gonna go up. We're fortunate that we will have that experience, and I personally am grateful for that. But I think next year, what I think would be really helpful is for us to talk about what a target is, what a reasonable target is in terms of increase, and we can do that, Eric, whatever matrix you know, you guys say like, okay, so when we say this percent, if that's how we decided to express it, I'm only using that because that's what historically the committee has done, said, please, you know, have a budget that comes in this percentage. You guys communicate, this is what we'd like to see, this is the information we need beforehand, and then we come with a budget and we have the conversation. And then maybe we don't have to fixate on percentages and whether they're actual or
Well, I don't think, yeah, I guess I do it a little differently. I view it as the school board coming up with, this is how we feel the school should be run, and these are the programs that we feel are very important. Let's present that to the budget committee or to the town, and the town can decide whether they wanna fund it or not. And we may have situations where, you know, because of a drop in, I'm just keep using this as an example, but because of a drop in enrollment, you know, we have one fewer split class. So all of a sudden that frees up some money compared to what we had in the prior year. So maybe we will this year say, you know, let's go ahead and fund another Italian program or something. You know,
Or no, we put it, that's why
Or-
we have the trust funds and
or, you know what I'm
stuff.
saying, but that, so I don't think that,
So I'm-
prospectively saying, okay, target 3% next year, Jeff, because it may be negative, target negative 15%, Jeff. You know, so
and that's fine. I'm just saying that historically, the board has operated in
We've done it
different
both
ways.
Yeah, but wasn't this your whole idea of using the trust fund and the high school trust fund to try to
Smooth out.
flatten
Yep.
these bumps in enrollment
Yep.
too?
Yep.
That's-
I feel bad saying one thing, I didn't mean to say Jeff's budget, this is,
The town's,
it's
Education
using
budget.
Jeff, this is the school, it's the school board. you know,
My
it's not-
problem with the school, and it isn't necessarily true with everybody, and I think this is the heart of the matter. There's certain items in the school budget that are based on enrollment. And there's certain items in the school budget that are what I'll call fixed items, like maintenance and physical plant. The number of reams of copy paper you buy is pretty much independent of enrollment. But the high school line is strictly an enrollment line. The special ed is the number of kids that require those services. So almost you got two parts of the budget. You got one part that you have to compare based on enrollment. And you got another part that you have to compare, last year's actual to this year's. And you're adding apples and oranges in the same spreadsheet and asking for one or the other of them to come up with a target, and I don't think you can do that.
It's difficult. Yep.
Because
So,
I don't want nectarines.
so, I will just end with this. I anticipate that next year, I think we should look at engaging the conversation slightly differently so that we understand collectively what we're looking for and what you'd like to see. So as to avoid a lot of time spent on creating a presentation that isn't the information that you need. And I think that next year is very likely that, I don't know, may not be the same X number of people, right? So I wanna know what the people are that are there at that time wanna see, and then I will bring that information to you so that we can have a
That's something
fruitful
you have to
conversation.
do, we have to do in this, in
Summertime.
September.
The sit-down.
Yeah,
In the
that first
October-
meeting.
Yep, that's great.
Right.
And do you guys want me to bring presentations or not?
Yes.
Today's was great, that was helpful.
Okay.
Last time was,
Yeah.
you restated what you were stating a couple different ways. I think one way probably would have been enough for me.
Okay.
But I also wanted to say how I really appreciate the effort going in this year to really hold the line on a lot of costs. I know it's easy to say, oh, we might find a little extra money, let's start another program that we've wanted. The town side this year was able to put in a significant amount of money at tax time to reduce taxes. And we have such a narrow fund left in the undesignated funds that the likelihood of being able to do that next year is really slim.
And I think
So
the good news is, I think
we
that
hope
we might be able to.
That we know need to do it, so,
Right.
yeah, it's great. It's nice to see that recognition of the effort that went in and to try and hold the line so that we're not in a really tough place increase next year.
And as I said, what I hope next year, or, when we, at the end of this year, we will have a surplus that we'll be able to return to taxpayers, to offset, what the town had done this year.
That'd be great, everyone would appreciate that.
Including you.
Including.
I would,
Yes.
if everybody is through with the school for a little bit, Judy has some changes she wants to.
Can I ask a quick question? Is it fair to ask? Chris voted no. And I'm
Chris.
curious, is it fair to ask why? Can I ask why?
I don't have a problem with it.
Well, you can tell her if you wanna say no, I usually would have her know what.
No, I mean, it's up to you if you don't want to do,
No.
I mean, it's up to you, so I don't wanna put you on the spot, I guess.
So if I were to ask each of us, what's the total headcount difference in each of the 3 years, 19, 20, 21, high school, middle school? Could you all go back and figure out cost per student for each of those? Are we spending more per student? My guess is yes, but it's hard to determine because I'm not putting those data items together. There are also one-time items in here that in 2019, got moved from other things to keep the budget close, the spend to close to budget. So we're comparing a annual budget to a 2019 that has one-time items in it. So it makes me uncomfortable that we haven't done enough analysis to say whether or not this is a good budget.
So what I would say is, and I would say this to everybody, we have public board meetings. We spend a lot of time building this. I extended a personal invitation to Rusty to come to even the finance committee. I would appreciate you coming to some of those so that you can have a sense of certainty as to, what items are going in the budget. So that you do have the information to feel like you can speak knowledgeably about what is, as opposed to just saying no because you're not sure. And so, and that wasn't a slight on your vote. What I'm saying is, you might at some point vote no, but you know why you're voting no, and it's not because you're like, I don't know how many of those one-time items are in there. That creates hesitation. So, I would love to sit down and go through it item by item so you can identify what things are one-time items and what things aren't. And I think that the only way to do that is to start working with us earlier. But you are absolutely welcome to do that. Matt is the finance committee. We meet regularly to build a budget. I would even invite you prior to that, as I did with Rusty, to sit down as Janet and I are working with departments to build the budget, so you can actually see the minutia. But just so that you
So when we
can.
left last meeting, I said I'm really interested in FTEs
Yep.
tracked over years and headcount tracked by various categories. So, being able to pull that together with these numbers and then take a look at one-time items is the discussion I think we should be having.
Okay. And
I'm not-
a lot of that information is available publicly in town reports, so you do have access to that. If you would like us to do that work with you, come on over. We can sit down and go through those. We'd be very happy to do that.
Are we ready to move on? This took a little longer than I thought it was going to, but anyway, Judy, it's your turn.
So,
Thank you all.
this also is not meant for a lot of discussion, it's meant for an update for you. These are pages that you saw earlier, we handed out. In November,
I'll take one, and then I will also pass
in November, we had $2,350,000 and change budget, operating budget. We've had a few payroll changes that also included some contract plowing help, which we hope to have, we haven't got yet, that has gone into the budget. So the operating budget is increased $2,367,649,000. We are projecting money into the capital reserve fund of $425,000 and a single 200,000. If you go to the second page, you will see that as we compared municipal budget from 2018 of 3,195,000 and change, the 219 appropriation was 3,193,000 and change. And this total appropriation, which is both the warrant articles and the operating budget of $2,992,649. So, and we will work up a spreadsheet updated for you. The third page has the proposed money, the warrant articles, just the nub of what the articles are, not all the wording and not all the raise and appropriate and withdraw and, you know, smoke and mirrors, but all the legalese, it is basically what we're looking for and how we plan to get it. You'll notice the first one is the fire station, and there's also a separate sheet on the fire station, which is the last page. A 7-year payment schedule for $500,000. This shows the updated operating budget. Two different numbers there, Gina, but it's the 2,367,649. Into the capital reserve and trust funds of 425. Expecting a block grant, nothing firm yet, but we expect it'll be about 100,000. Some design and engineering for the River Road at North Thetford Road, which is the next road that is going to need some significant work. It'll, I can't remember the total amount, $1.5 million.
Yes, well, 550 is our share,
And
5%.
we pay 35%, right? Yeah. So we're also looking at putting some money in the class 5 road rehabs, 200,000. I think I skipped one other thing, but you can certainly walk down that. We will give you more detail on each of those. You will also notice that I believe page 5 is a beginning estimate of major road projects that we have taken up to 2024. And these are things that we are looking at and hoping to fund, extending out the amount of work that gets done with one major project each year and hoping to have them funded so that we don't take the big hits unless, of course, we have a July 1st storm or a road totally disappear. But I think I didn't intend to have a lot of discussion with you because I know it's last minute, you're just getting it now, and we expected either next week or the week after to come in with all the details fleshed out for you.
Does the milfoil get paid by the conservation?
The milfoil is some by Conservation Commission, I believe we get some other funds for it, and then the town usually pays a portion.
Because we usually take a
7
little bit.
or 8,000.
There are three sources of funding, aren't there? Yes, Conservation Fund.
We get a grant. We also have a fund that has been held over year after year. There's about a little over 8,000 in that. And then what's left, we will ask the Conservation Commission. if they
Yes, we
will.
voted on each year.
They need to talk about it and get back. I just sent them a message today. It's about 12, yeah. So, we don't know the answer yet from that, but I'm pretty sure they'll probably be nice and help us out.
I have a couple questions. What's GPR?
Goose Pond Road.
Okay.
It's our
You
code
didn't
word.
know that?
I was trying to go through all the road names and couldn't come up with it. And then the other is on the capital reserve funds.
Yeah,
Like,
page 4.
yeah, usually we get some sort of like schedule, did we see this back in October or whatever, like schedule of balance for different items and when we're purchasing or replacing?
Oh,
The worksheet.
the worksheet?
Yeah.
I don't know that you've seen it. We have a rough worksheet worked out. We can certainly provide that copy for you.
Okay, thank you.
Have we seen the new police truck around?
We have seen the police truck around.
I haven't been driving
I
fast.
guess guess you haven't been going fast enough, yeah.
Can I give you a suggestion where to drive?
No, it came back, did it have a bad transmission or something?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, did it
no, it's
really?
all set, yep. Yep, has a new transmission now.
And Ford paid for it? Okay.
Dick? I think with this new stuff from Judy, we're not ready to vote on anything. And there needs some more work putting it into the final format that would be something that would go to a public hearing. And so there, and I would like to get it out enough before the meeting so people have a chance
Yep.
to look at it and do their homework, so we can only go with a single round of questioning rather than having to have a second meeting of questions. And if you do have questions that the data doesn't answer, if you can email them to Dina, not to me, not to other members of the committee, so that she can brief the selectmen so that they can at least try to get the information to answer your questions at the meeting. But don't discuss it among ourselves, but just go through Dina and she will feed the questions to the appropriate person if it's not in the package, so that makes it imperative to get this package out. Does anybody have any further questions on that administratively?
Well, I was just gonna suggest that this, along the lines of what Jeff was asking for feedback, this might be a good opportunity for people to ask for what they would like to see as part of the package.
All right.
I mean, otherwise we'll get it like Tuesday evening or something,
No,
right?
no, you won't get it Tuesday. You want a worksheet, the vehicle replacement worksheet, you want the budget sheets, you want the warrant articles.
Yep,
What else?
GPR spelled out.
You're gonna need some help with some of the abbreviations.
Well, I think the other thing you probably wanna look at is all of the capital reserves and their balances and what's going in. So you got the vehicle, the heavy equipment, but there's other ones. So I
Well,
think,
we've got the balance in the town report, I mean, it's not as if
We can,
people don't have it if they don't want to.
We have a short spreadsheet.
I was just trying to identify what I'm gonna be working on, so I'm just trying to clarify what
Yeah.
Linda and I would be putting together, so thank you. If you don't want it, that's fine, but I would think that you would.
Scott wants it, so we'll do it.
I mean, they can go dig, yeah, I know, but we've got the data.
Somebody, yeah. All right, now Sue wanted to raise something as a question at one point before we move.
Well, I have a comment and a suggestion. A year ago, with the Conservation Commission put up $10,000 towards a replacement of a culvert with beaver deceivers and so forth. This year, I understand they're having a significant amount of input for the land use change tax. So maybe the Conservation Commission would be willing to make a greater contribution this year.
Since that's where they get their funding from, the Sioux
Right.
Point.
So town is affected by beaver enrollment.
and we don't have a very clear number on that.
No, but beavers,
They
the
do have
Conservation
some
Commission
limits
will give
as
us money,
to-
so we blame it on the beavers.
So Sue, you're asking for us to ask them hopefully to contribute more to the milfoil, is that?
Yeah, my understanding is there's like $100,000 going in this year or something in that range.
Not to the milfoil, you're talking
No.
about for
Land
culverts.
use.
He's talking,
Since they get
Covered.
I
Land
know, but
use.
you're
They
not
get help.
asking for them to contribute more to milfoil, you're asking for them to contribute to another culvert project.
Right,
Ah.
or a road project or some other,
We've gotta be a little careful on that it meets the criteria that they're allowed to spend the funds on.
Right.
And I think culvert replacement is kind of stretching.
depends on the
Beavers,
color.
beavers.
This one,
It's right.
Transplant beavers.
this one
There's very
involved,
definite limits as to what they can spend the conservation fund on.
Different kinds of culverts have different environmental impacts, and more expensive ones are better for wildlife. And they could
We'll
contribute
check
to
on
that.
that.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a good thing to check on.
All right, any further on the Judy's got a list? Can you try to get that stuff out fairly quickly?
We can, I would like to suggest that we not meet on the 15th, but have the information on the 15th. But if you wanna meet on the 15th, we will get it out.
Well, if we meet on the 22nd, we're not ready for the public hearing on those items on the 22nd, so we'd have to be the public hearing. is
I'm not
originally
gonna have
scheduled.
warrant articles for them all written out and approved by our attorney by then. You can look at the money, the
Yeah, but
money
the
end
money's
of
right
it.
in here.
Right, but you're not gonna, Chris, you're not supposed to be approving the wording anyways,
No.
you're just approving,
The amount of funding.
so this is, you know,
So
this
what day
has
are we
the
gonna
amount of
do?
funding on it.
So the question comes, there are two questions in terms of the schedule, and we'll correct the draft as part of this package. The first one's an easy one. The school district meeting is on the 5th instead of the 6th
Of March.
of March. That was a typo. And that one's an easy correction. And then the next correct thing is, with this additional material from the selectmen, we normally had sort of one debating type public hearing and then one sort of bang, 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 bang after everybody agreed with stuff public hearings. And we run into a timing to get it into the town report. If we go on the 5th as originally scheduled, and then if we need a second one, doing it on the 12th, we run into issues with getting the town report published. So what was, the discussion was, as to whether we could go to a public hearing on the 22nd as the first public hearing instead of, so move what is listed as 2.5 up to 122, and move what is listed as 2.12 to 2.5. And then you would say not meet on the 15th, but we don't have what would go to the public hearing then if we do that, we don't meet on the 15th. See what I'm saying, Judy?
Oh, I hear ya, but, okay.
Now, do you want, where are you gonna be ready? And the
We
same
have to
thing with
know.
the school money articles.
Yeah, because they're not getting their stuff till the 15th either, but, we can get you
Why
every,
can't we do it on the 22nd?
it makes it hard for the town
It's-
report if
You
we
can't-
need
you
a second
can't-
public hearing.
You can't have your public hearing to address all the warrant articles having to do with money until February 5th, period. Because the 4th is the last day for petition warrant articles to come to the town, and they may involve money,
So then
you
why is
don't
the
know.
22nd too late?
The 22nd is fine to have a public hearing on the budgets and
Oh, I
talk
see.
more about warrant articles and all that, but you can't approve your final warrant articles.
So we've
Until
gotta have
the
the
5th.
final approval on the 5th.
Right.
So we can miss the 15th.
So we could miss the 15th, have a pretty good conversation on the 22nd,
and be
so
all
that
set.
hopefully we only needed the one public hearing on the 5th.
Got it.
That's what I would propose, liking to do, and cancel the 25th, I mean, the 15th. Cancel the 15th. The 22nd is the vote for what goes to the public hearing following discussions, and we would need
Yes. That's.
whatever updates you can give us on the school. That'd be the sort of final updates before the public
Yeah.
hearing.
My only
And
question,
warrant
would be to Matt, in terms of, negotiations with the CBA. What is your anticipated, point at which you will have that worked out?
Do you have any idea how that, I mean, we don't have any idea how the contract negotiations are going.
And he can't, legally, he can't talk about them, that's why.
Well, I mean, he can just say, they're not complete yet.
Right, and he can say this is kind of where our target of completion is, but.
Yeah, the target had been that 15th meeting, so it would still be because we have a school board meeting on the 14th.
Okay.
So that you hopefully will have what those numbers are gonna be on the 22nd,
Yeah.
but you wouldn't have them on the 15th.
No, Janet wouldn't have, no, because the as it's scheduled now.
All right, we will cancel the meeting on the 15th. The 22nd will be what we vote to take to the public hearing on all the warrant articles, and we may only have the money figures, we may not have the legalistic wording.
Dave,
So-
can you clarify the date of the public hearing?
The 5th,
February 5th.
I I saw something else with the town calendar, so maybe I'm just confused.
Probably the 22nd, we will notice it, but it will be, we will be talking about final vote from the budget committee on the warrant articles and the operating budget.
But it won't be a legal, there won't be that legal public hearing that's required for town meeting, school district meeting.
And that's on the fifth.
That's on the fifth. The
7 o'clock.
22nd would be just a
Right.
working
Updating.
meeting with public comments rather than a
So
public
if
hearing.
information goes to all of you on Friday, the 17th, which is
That's the last day.
That's
close
right.
to a week ahead, not quite, is that enough time? Or do you wish it sooner than that?
Good enough for me.
They can have everything you have done, but
Yeah,
I don't think they'll have warrant articles sooner.
Well,
I'm
It-
just gonna
it-
send the rest of it out this week if that's
Right.
better for you.
I would say,
But you already given us the numbers for the warrant article.
We've given you the
I
numbers,
mean,
but
I'm not worried
Right.
about, you can word it.
We can
how
give you
everybody
the
has
Well,
it.
you guys can offer any changes you want, but our attorney in the DRA will
Yeah,
probably
they're
say,
gonna-
thanks
they're the ones-
anyways,
yeah.
but we've already done it.
yeah, DRA decides.
I mean, I
You don't
have
have a
to
lot of
word it the
control,
way that
so,
they say
yeah,
it,
you
right,
know.
even if it sounds silly,
And it has.
and a lot of times it does.
And so the school, if the school can also get it out that Friday, that gives you Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Is that not enough? Would you like it sooner?
Fine.
Is that fine? Okay.
All right, do we have any other business that we have to do tonight, or can we go home before 9
Kevin
o'clock?
has a question.
Well, I just wanted to, since Chief Monday was here, if the Budget Committee wanted to hear from him with respect to the fire hall.
Can you do it in
Good
60 seconds?
fundraising?
60 seconds.
There's no real substantial changes, I just noticed watching the video of the last meeting that, it was mentioned, and I thought I'd show up tonight just see if you had any questions about where we're at. And if not, and nothing changes on my end, then, I'll see you at town meeting, and I won't need to be here again, hopefully.
We're looking forward to having you get up at town meeting and offer an amendment to that article, Chief.
Well, just send in the check. We're still taking donations. We'll keep going right till the last
Find
minute.
somebody that wants to name the firehouse after them for a big, big check.
Yeah. They haven't showed up yet, but we're still trying, we did pretty good so far.
So you think you're on track for your current goal?
Yes, I think we're on track for our current goal, yes. In terms of spending and in terms of money raising, it seems like we're working real hard to hold it at that, even though we're bumping into some challenges with cost, but we think we can hold on to it, yeah. Yeah.
Well, hopefully you won't have to do what we did with the town offices here, where there was $100,000 worth of things that didn't get done originally, like air conditioning.
Hope not.
But we got a coupon. How's the, sorry, that was really smart.
That was nasty.
Wow.
No,
It's not on there.
I like to get it
Donated
done.
two air conditioners from
Yeah.
my dad's place for the first office.
The donations that you guys have gotten in,
Mhm. Yeah, it's going really well,
what is
yeah.
it up to?
Well,
That
we've
was
got
the
we've got the almost $100,000 that's in the bank already. We got the 100 from the Swan, we got the 100 matching from that, and there's another 50 that's been committed, and there's another possible 25, so we're getting close to that 400 number that we
Almost.
talked about. So
That's
we're getting
great.
close, yeah, which,
And I got a few more in the mail,
Good,
small ones, but we're
good,
still,
good,
yeah,
and then
no.
we'll keep, we'll keep trying.
Good.
So, yeah, it's moving along, so.
Thank you for joining
Yeah,
us.
you bet.
Sorry you had to
Time to
wait
put
so
out
long.
another thing on the listserv?
Yeah, I'll put something else out again, certainly before town meeting, and bring everyone up to speed and remind them again about where we're at and what the project's about, yeah, definitely one more time, sure.
That'd be great.
Yeah, sure. Good. See you guys in a bit.
All right. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Yeah.
Who seconded?
So are we gonna continue to wear matching shirts?
This was a Christmas present from my
It's supposed to be
sister.
mine.
Well, yeah.
For my sister.
But Sean has the same
Well, it was, I think it was the new, my sister said it was MLB's new flag this year. And they, the one that got me is, my favorite flag from MLB is one with you know, the red one. And they haven't, and I read,
Way more.
there is nobody that has a flag. My family, one of the friends, the old. You're a whiz on the I have never seen the dress. The new ones are the same.
No, it just came in.
That's Tuesday.
Oh, I see.
Oh, you can print it from your phone?
So then,
The tractor, I think, is up here, I don't think that's the tractor. It could be.
I know.
and I wanted to see,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I just got a new iPhone, I tried out
Any